She's sleeping or what? Your other half. Oh, she's there. Oh, okay. She changed her outfit. She's hiding now. Camouflage. Right. We'll do one song from the Bhajan of the Acharyas. We do it regularly. It's called Nama Kirtana. We know it also as Yasomati Nandana. Yay. And she looks like we lost a little bit. Some of them took too much prashad and can't get up. They were practicing Atyahara just to see what it was like. Experience by default. Okay. Yasomati Nandana Brajavara Nagara Gokula Yasomati Nandana Brajavara Nagara Gokula Hey, I'm not coming. Mother calls him. Better be playing than eating. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming. So this is the third in the series of verses on the, actually, it's the second half of the second verse. So this is the third class. And so far we covered verse 1 and half of verse 2. And we'll go through a quick overview. The first verse was that in order to stay fixed in devotional service, one has to overcome the urges of the mind and the body. The urges of the mind are what? What are the urges? The three urges?
Tongue, belly, belly.
Tongue,
belly, belly.
No, that's not a urges of the mind are. Just one at a time. Urge of the mind are what? Oh, okay. The urge to speak, the urge of the mind's pushing, and the last one, anger. These three. And the urges of the body are, well, tongue, which means eating, belly, fill me up, genitals, haribo. Best I can do with that one. So not haribo, but uh-oh. So these are the 6 urges. But one has to control them by connecting them to the activities of devotional service. By connecting these activities to devotional service, they are under control and they're directed towards the spiritual rather than to try to fulfill some mundane material desire or urge. Vagam means pushing, the desire to talk, pushing, desire to the mind to want to express whatever is in there, whether it's good or not. Anger comes when desire is frustrated or situations become intolerable. Tongue wants to taste so many nice things, so running here and there to Sunil's sweet shop. So trying to get so many tastes. Lord Chaitanya is very strong on that point. He says, chasing the urges of the tongue, you'll never catch Krishna. So accepting prashadam as it comes and be satisfied with that. Of course, we also have our preferences, but it's not like it becomes a focus of our enjoyment. The belly wants to get filled. When it gets filled, it thinks, aha, I'm happy. But tongue, belly, and genitals become activated or stronger when we fill up the belly. Then there's pushings on the lower parts of the body, and then the urge of the genitals becomes stronger and stronger. Especially after you eat and then you go to sleep, then when you wake up, it's strong. It can be very strong. If you eat too much, that is. And so all of these can be tempered by the activities of devotional service. For the genitals, and then you have Krishna conscious children, according to rules and regulations and requirements for family life. For the belly, it says should fill it with food, 1/4 with air, 1/4 with water, each meal. So each one of these things, you want to speak about Krishna, devotional service, something that is beneficial for others. These were the first verse we covered. So unless one controls these urges, it becomes very hard to practice Krishna consciousness. It becomes very difficult. The second verse we mentioned, we'll read it again because we finished half of it. It has 6 characteristics mentioned in the second verse. We'll do that verse again from the beginning. So one's devotional service is spoiled when it becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities: eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required, over endeavoring for mundane things that are difficult to obtain, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. And then we listed the different categories of unnecessary talks, such as lies, debates, criticism, fault finding, general gossip, worldly talks. These are all against the principle of controlling the tongue. So we covered those 3 so far in the first 2. Now, the 4th, 5th, and 6th, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independent or whimsically. 5, associating with worldly minded people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And number 6, being greedy for mundane achievements. So the 4th one, where we left off, is called Niyamagraha. And Prabhupada says, immediate benefit means thinking that by following your religion, you'll get a good family, your children will be with you for a long time, you'll get an automobile, and so on. Immediate benefit also means that when you die, you go to heaven and stay there forever. You have seen some pictures in Christian magazines depicting heaven. It's a lush garden with a 1950 suburban style 1-story house that even has a television antenna. The family is out back for a barbecue, and there's one black man, one Asian man, and a lion with a lamb. Everyone is there except Jesus and Jehovah. That's not Prabhupada, that's Hanuman Purushottam Maharaj. It's very funny. It's kind of like a Petri local planet for the ancestors. Anyway, these are somebody's imaginations. So in other words, in heaven, you follow rules and regulations, you're a good boy, you're given charity, Haribol, and then you make it to the other world. That's not bhakti. Here we'll get right to Bhakti Vinod Thakur. He says, undue addiction to the observance of rules of the Shastras or the total neglect of these rules must be avoided. Commandments, that's positive assertions, prohibitions, negative assertions. The Shastras try to regulate our lives with all these methods, directly and indirectly, and inspire genuine devotion. So rules and regulations are meant to get you off the bodily platform. They're not bhakti themselves, they just keep you away from performing activities which keep you on the bodily platform. The highest stage of spiritual realization is attained after a graduated stages. In each of these stages, we mentioned that there are 9 stages of bhakti: Adastrado, Sadhu, Sangha, Bhajana, Kriya, Anartha, Nivritti, Nishta, Ruchi, Ashakti, Bhava, and ultimately the goal is prema. So as we go through the stages, we make advancement from one stage to another. It says the strict performance of these prescribed duties makes him eligible for the next immediate stage. Failure to observe these and failure in these observances bring him a downfall from the spiritual path. Addiction to the duties of a stage which is already passed by the aspirant all stops his progress. So we have to know where we are in bhakti and what is the next step we have to go to, and then aspire for that and work towards developing that. A sadhaka should perform his duties allotted to a particular phase of the development with sincerity and never be indifferent to them. So this niyamagraha has 2 aspects: thinking that rules and regulations are not necessary and rejecting them and on acting whimsically. or becoming so adherent to the rules and regulations that they think the rules and regulations are bhakti themselves. And performing them in a very, what we say, what's the word? Strict way. It's good to perform them strict, but these just get you off, just like no illicit sex, no intoxication, no meeting, no gambling. These are prohibitions. These are requirements in order to get off the bhakti platform and to be free from sinful activities. Otherwise, we cannot actually elevate ourselves to the platform of goodness, which is the platform by which bhakti functions. On the lower modes, such as the mode of passion and ignorance, for instance, the lower mode of passion is I perform activities for some material or some personal benefit. In other words, I do bhakti because I can get something from it. Something material, some position, some remuneration, some reciprocation. In other words, I'm motivated by fruitive activities. I'm motivated by personal gain. That's the mode of passion. The mode of ignorance is that I'm performing bhakti and I don't even know why I'm doing it. I think it's a good idea. And I use it simply to increase my sense gratification, that's all. That's mode of ignorance. Or, as it's explained, I know bhakti is powerful and Krishna is there, and therefore I hate that person, therefore I perform bhakti to destroy that person. Yeah, Krishna, get him, he's my enemy. Yeah, it's like that. There's people who do that. They go to spiritual life in order to eliminate their opponents, their so-called opponents anyway. And a mode of goodness means I perform bhakti with the proper mood, following the different principles by which the bhakti is executed: tolerance, humility, pridelessness, cleanliness, truthfulness, simplicity, understanding Shastras, knowing how to apply Shastras in different situations. What else? There's 12 different characteristics. That is wanted to perform bhakti and develop those qualities that are conducive to bhakti, which are the characteristics of the soul. But that still keeps one in the mode and in the material energy. When we perform bhakti, ayabila sita sunya, jnana karmana avritam, anukulena Krishna silanam, bhakti uttama, perform bhakti for the pleasure of the Lord with an intention to please the Lord. In other words, I want to please the Lord, and therefore I make an effort in my execution of devotional service to make my offering pleasing, doing it with devotion, with attention, with a desire to please, and not looking for personal gain, either through fruitive activities, as we mentioned, or through philosophical speculation on the absolute truth. In other words, I don't want to be a great jnani, know the Shastras really well. That's not my goal. That may come as a byproduct, but it's not the reason for one to perform devotional service. Now, the jnanis, or not, I'm sorry, the demons also please Krishna, but they don't get bhakti because their intention is not to please Krishna. But they please Krishna by wanting to fight, and Krishna likes to fight. So because he enjoys fighting, he has somebody to fight with. Can't fight with devotees. Sometimes devotees try to fight with him, but he doesn't fight back. He just ignores you. But the demons, they like to give God trouble. And Krishna, you see within the Shastras how many times Krishna, when he was in Vrindavan, Krishna was living there. It says that every day there was at least 2 demons coming to harass the devotees in Vrindavan and to try to kill Krishna. But of course, no one can kill God. It's not possible. So Krishna enjoyed that. It was like some sporting. Prabhupada says he flexes his muscles. He doesn't have to go to Gold's Gym to get workout. He just kills a few demons here and there. He tightens his belt and gets ready for action. So where do you get that fighting spirit from? From Krishna? Because you like to fight also. Maybe you don't like to, but you do. That principle of fighting or competition, trying to be overcome someone, we do that even in our occupations. We try to be better than others in whatever we're doing. That competitive spirit is there in Krishna. It's there in Krishna. And because we are part of Krishna, we also have that quality or that characteristic. But when it's used in a material way, it brings you in more and more down into the material energy, entangles you in wrong activities. Who can eat the most pizza, you know? Of course, the early days of Krishna consciousness used to be glubjam eating contests. Devotees would sit, you know that Yugla, right? Yeah, and the devotees would sit there and they'd have the cooks cook big piles of glubjams, and then they would have the Maharatis up there in front. There was one competition in St. Louis where Bhakti Tirtha Swami was in the forefront of the competition. And there was another person, and they were tied at 86 glubjamins each. And these weren't the small ones, these were the full-size glubjamins. Can you imagine how much sugar that is? That's like intoxication. So this person thought, I'm going to eat 88 and I'm going to defeat him. But he ate the last two, but he lost by default. You can figure that one out. So the idea, that's not the idea. These things are just some kind of, but the competitive spirit is there within the conditioned soul, or even within devotees, just like devotees compete for who can distribute the most books, who can do, what else? What else do we compete each other for? I don't know, I forgot. Mostly it's book distribution is the competitive thing. Who can get the best room in the temple? In other words, competing is there, but it should be done for the pleasure of Krishna, not for some personal gain. Yeah. Okay, so following rules and regulations and not knowing why you're following, or following rules and regulations and are not following rules and regulations and simply rejecting them. That's all. So these things are there. One should avoid association with Mayavadis who simply blaspheme Vaishnavas, Bhukti Karmis who are interested in material happiness, Mukti Karmis who desire liberation by merging into the existence of the formless absolute Brahman, Siddhi Kamis who desire the perfection of mystic practice. These are all called Atyaharis. These things are all unwanted. Clearly, the pronunciation, the prominent item in this verse, so far as we would be, is Atyahara, over collecting, because everything is connected to that. Prayasa is endeavoring to over collect, and Lauyam is dreaming about it. And Sangha Sadhu Sangam, Sangha Tyaga means giving up the association of Atyaharis, both gross and subtle, like that. So we'll go on to the next one, which is Atyahara, Lauyam, and then the last one is Sadhu Sangha. Jana Sangha, not Jana Sangha, Jana Sangha. Prabhupada takes them in a different order, and he mentions Jana Sangha. So you might think, how is it possible not to associate with non-devotees? We have work, we have interaction with the material people for our needs within the household and so many things. But one thing is understood, sadhu, association means affection for. So therefore, devotees should associate, develop affection for each other, because we're all trying for the same goal, at least theoretically. We're trying to become Krishna conscious. So we associate with each other and become inspired with our own execution of devotional service, which inspires others in there. And we develop a relationship with others based on that. The karmis and non-devotees, they do the same thing. They make their different clubs, their different groups, according to what they want to achieve. You know, they have this club and this organization, that organization. They have Diabetes Anonymous, so many groups, this group, that group, this group. Some goal, and they develop some relationship with each other because they all have a common goal. We don't have a common goal with the non-devotees, but still we have to associate with them. So don't be careful not to develop that type of association with the non-devotees where we enter into their value system. If we listen to or adhere to or even applaud their value system, then we're developing a relationship based on those values. And then we start to become affected by that. And then that is actually Janasanga, a wrong association. But if you go to the store to buy something, you say hello to the merchant, you might be your friend. He gives you the product, you pay. You have some, what we say, superficial connection with the person, but you don't ask him about his house, how's he doing, what's his like in the family. All of these things will start to enter into the mood of affection for. And that is somewhat restriction here, because then what that does is that it blocks our relationship with Krishna. When Lord Chaitanya was asked by Sanatana Goswami, what is the first duty of one who is beginning Krishna consciousness? Lord Chaitanya went right to the point. He said, Asat Sangha Tayaga E Vaishnava Achar. Asat, that association that is undesirable, Ansat Sangha E Vaishnava Achar. One should give up the association of the non-devotees and take the association of devotees. That is the foundation by which one makes progress in devotional service. And we develop those values, those attributes that are conducive to the practice of Krishna consciousness in the association of devotees. We hear, we chant, we glorify, we worship, we take prasadam. We do things in the association of devotees. It brings the devotees closer together to each other and to Krishna at the same time. In the same way, if you do that with the non-devotees, you enter into that same type of energy, but that energy is material and brings you away from Krishna consciousness. So it's dangerous. Usually when people practice Krishna consciousness and they start to fall away, the first thing they start to do is associate with the non-devotees. And this is the first indication of their losing their connection with the process of devotional service. And then they relish that association, thinking that's better than the association of devotees. Devotees are too strict. The non-devotees will take you as you are, but they'll take you down because their value systems are different like that. They talk about their parties and all of their whatever else they do, and the material topics. So one should be very diligent not to get in too much into the atmosphere of non-devotees, because it will destroy bhakti quite fast. It's one of the most dangerous. And the last one is lauyam. We mentioned that intermittently in connection with atyahara. Lauya means greed, to collect, mukti, bhukti, siddhi, kami. In other words, one should avoid association with people who are interested in material happiness, mystic yoga, all of these things, merging into the formless, the mayavadis. Prabhupada talks about this. He says, modern warfare waged between the capitalists and the communists is due to their avoiding the advice of Rupa Goswami regarding Atyahara. Modern capitalists accumulate more wealth than necessary, and the communists, envious of their prosperity, want to nationalize all wealth and property. Unfortunately, the communists do not know how to solve the problem of wealth and its distribution. Consequently, when the wealth of the capitalists falls into the hands of the communists, there is no solutions. Then Srila Prabhupada describes the solutions in terms of the invocation of Sri Ishopanishads. The wealth of the world actually belongs to Krishna. Ishavasham idam sarvam. And every living entity, man or animal, has a birthright to use God's property for his maintenance. When one takes more than his maintenance required, be he a capitalist or a communist, he is a thief. And as such, he is liable to be punished by the laws of nature. The wealth of the world should be used for the welfare of all living entities, for that is the plan of Mother Nature. Everyone has a right to live by using the wealth of the Lord. But then again, it doesn't become like a process of greediness, trying to get more and more and more. Because that breaks the principle of living according to one's needs. And then one starts to overcollect, and there's Atyahara again. So Atyahara runs through the whole theme of these 6 anomalies or 6 deficiencies. One should be very, just for instance, a businessman will always think, I'm making like 100% profit, let me make 200. I'm making 200, let me make 500, like that. So in the world today, the more you make, the more you're considered to be successful. But it's like that's the expense of material nature, and at the expense of others who you try to squeeze out whatever you can. Therefore, according to the Manu Samhita, Manu Samhita is the law books of mankind, are revised every millennium or every so many thousands of years, they're revised. But it says in the Manu Samhita, the latest version, that in business, one should make only 25% profit. And business is a service. It's not an economic adventure. Should be done as a service to those who you interact with. And therefore, you take the 25% profit, you put some back into the business and further your business like that, and keep using that. And of course, it's mentioned giving in charity also to balance out excess amounts of wealth that can be used for the benefit of others by giving in charity, especially for propagating religious movements in the world. These are all recommended. So these are the 6 defects that one can somehow or other encounter in the execution of devotional service. So we should know what they are and how to avoid them. And how to avoid them is also mentioned in the 3rd verse, where it is explained what are the 6 principles by which bhakti flourishes. What is the 6 principles by which bhakti flourishes? And that's the next verse. But before we go into the next verse, I was thinking, is there anyone who would like to comment on any of the 6 that we had discussed so far in the last class and a half? Everyone? Janasanga, Niyamagraha, Lauyam, Atyahara, Prayasa, and Prajalpa. Yeah.
Thank you. I want, when I was listening to you, I got the question. So if you perform bhakti, thinking that, if I perform bhakti, then only my anarthas will go, then I can perform bhakti better. So what motive is it good way of thinking or no?
If I perform bhakti, what will go? My attachments?
And moksha and
Yeah.
I come out of another, then you like can perform bhakti better. So
Well, anartha, which means unwanted. Artha means auspicious, desirable, beneficial. Anartha means the opposite. And these are blocks in our progress. Bhaktivinoda Thakur lists the anarthas. There's 16 anarthas, 4 categories of 4, and he mentions them and describes each one of them. So these anarthas, they block your progress in devotional service. So one has to, before you can move to the higher levels of bhakti, you have to at least eliminate 75% of the anarthas. So there's anarthas that come by way of philosophical misconceptions. Who am I? If you think you're this body, you think you're Indian or whatever your body designation is, if you identify that, that's ignorance. Jiversu by Krishna and Nityadas. We are pure spiritual entities and we have an eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord. That is our real identity. And the activities of that identity is devotion to the Lord. So misconceptions about who we are, who is Krishna, what is his position? We don't really know Krishna or his position. We have a little understanding. We think Krishna is there to give us what we need to live happily in this world. But he is actually there to accept our devotion and bring us closer to him in the process of purification. This is, and what else? Not knowing the sadhana of prema bhakti and not knowing the sadhana of sadhana bhakti. So not knowing the process means not hearing from the scriptures, not hearing from the spiritual teachers. We just go blindly into doing things. And we can easily make mistakes and think that our material, spiritual activities are just another form of material activities. But they're not. So that's one category. The other category is anarthas that come by highest activities. If you perform highest activities, you can get elevation to the heavenly planets. You can get mystic power. You can get good opportunities for material enjoyment. And you can also eligible for liberation. So each one of these 4 is an anartha. It's not desirable for a devotee to have any of these 4. Their desire is to go back to Godhead, to awaken their love for Krishna. All of these are elevating, but at the same time, there are blocks in one's progress in devotional service. And then there's 4 categories of anarthas by impious activities, which are performing activities which are against bhakti, in other words, sinful activities. Illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, gambling are some of them. Envy, duplicity and fault finding, and pratishta. Pratishta means a desire to become famous by bhakti. I entered the spiritual program because I want to become known as a great spiritualist, get some accolades, get a good position, make some money. Acha hey, right? Acha hey! I did it. Wow, I made it to the top. I'm a guru, but not a real guru. You're a guru. That means cow, not a. So that's not the idea. So that's called pratishta. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati says this ideal for material fame through bhakti is like the stool of a boar. And the acharyas give us some definition of what is boar stool. It's recycled stool. because the boar eats stool and then he passes stool. So that's called recycle stool. Well, sounds really exciting. So the acharyas get right to the point about these things that are so desirable by persons with material consciousness. And we can drag our material consciousness into bhakti and think it's actually bhakti if we have these goals for bhakti. The goal of bhakti is to make progress towards the goal of life, prema pumartha maha. That is the only goal. And everything else that we may set as goals, such I want to chant nicely, I want to understand the scriptures, I want to associate with devotees. These are intermediate goals that lead to the higher goal. These are acceptable. But anything material simply relegates one to a lower position and ultimately is against bhakti. So, and then these four: envy, duplicity, and fault finding, pratishta, fame, and is executing of sinful activities for sense gratification are the four categories of impious anarthas. And the last one is offenses. Offenses are four categories. There's five, but four mentioned. Offenses against the holy name. We know we chant one of the 10 offenses against the holy name, along with the 11th offense. Offenses against the deity. Just like if we're sitting with our arms like that in front of the deity, that's considered to be an offense. It says that you cannot hold your arms like that in front of the deity like that. So we don't know that, but if we read Nectar Devotion, and sorry to use you as an example, but I think Krishna set you up for so I could speak that one. Anyway, these are the things that we should avoid. To talk loudly in front of the deity, to chastise someone in front of the deity, to come with unclean garments in front of the deity like that, or not being clean yourself. These are all things that that are considered to be anarthas or offenses. We think that offenses to the deity is just the pujari. No, it's even in the temple room. If the behavior and the activity are not in line with the scriptural injunctions, then we are getting some reaction for that. So to sit in front of the Lord means to be very much in the right consciousness, in the right mood also. And then, of course, there's offenses against Vaishnavas, which are the most serious. There's 6 ways to offend a Vaishnava. One is to kill a Vaishnava. Of course, we don't do that one. Sometimes we want to, but we shouldn't do it. Kill a Vaishnava. The second most, the least, this is from severity down to least severity. The next one is to blaspheme a Vaishnava. The next one is to be envious of a Vaishnava. The next one is to be angry towards a Vaishnava. The next one is to not respect a Vaishnava. And the last one is to not feel happy when you see a Vaishnava. So what do you do with that one? You just go start smiling and act like you're happy? No, that's not exactly. What you do is you pay your obeisances. That automatically nullifies any possibility of wrong activity. As soon as you see a Vaishnava, if you don't feel happy, you pay obeisances. So these are the 6 things by which we can commit offenses to Vaishnavas, which are the most serious in the category of offenses. And the last one is offenses towards the non-devotees, people in general, because they're also spirit souls, and there may not be in devotional service, but we should still give them respect according to their position and not minimize them or find reasons to criticize. So that's also important. And how we behave in the association of the non-devotees is an example of our, what we say, practice of Krishna consciousness. So what is that? Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, I live in this world somehow because I give respects to everyone. Everyone is respectable in the sense that Krishna is in the heart of all living entities. So therefore, if you see Vidya Vinaya Sampane, Brahmani Gabi Hastini, Suni Chaiva Swapakecha, Pandita Samadarshana. So a devotee, he sees the body, but he also knows that that body contains a pure spirit soul who is part and parcel of Krishna and very dear to Krishna also. So we follow the, what we say, proper etiquette and behavior in association with the non-devotees. Okay, and so these anarthas will, they're like coverings or blocks in our problem, so we have to be aware of them. And there's ways to remove it. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that if you do kirtan regularly, you can destroy your anarthas fast. Kirtan, Harinam, Sankirtan, particularly and specifically, chanting the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, is the fast track. It's very enjoyable, but it also eliminates the tendency to commit anartha because it gives one a higher taste, and it purifies the heart very quickly. So take part in kirtan, and you'll see you'll make a lot of advancement in spiritual life. Some of us, we find it difficult to take part in kirtan, but if you're there and you're singing, at least if you're singing, that's taking part in kirtan. If you can get really into it, then you forget about the material world. It just disappears. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Yes, we have one in the back there.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So, I had a question regarding Jana Sangha's, and so in college, one thing you said was that if we're constantly in the atmosphere of non-devotees, it can be degrading toward bhakti. So in college, it's a little difficult because you're constantly in that environment, you're studying in that environment, you're living in that environment. Like whereas at home, like you have at home your TDs and your parents to bring you back and like that kind of association. But whereas in college, the association is rare. So like I was just wondering what kind of recommendations do you have to make sure that you're
Well, you're gonna be affected. But one way you can become less affected and also very beneficial is become the association. In other words, you're a devotee and try to give them devotee association. In other words, topics could center around Krishna consciousness, at least spiritual practice. And that brings them into your association rather than you associate with them. You become the association and not accept their association. And that is of course, you have to practice that and be somewhat diligent in doing that. So in our friends, we let them know we're a devotee. And they understand we have a different values and we perform different activities. They become interested in that, then you can also help them understand more about spiritual life in different ways. Bringing prasadam regularly and distributing prasadam. This is done in offices where people work and in other places where devotees find themselves in. That can also bring about nice relationships. But still, you have to still temper that in such a way as that you don't get too personal in their life, because if you do, you might find yourself in an awkward situation where what you believe in and what you practice becomes challenged by what they believe in. And then you find yourself either disagreeing with them or wanting to not disagree, and then you somehow accept that as something important. And then you're gradually bringing your consciousness towards the material again. If that becomes continuous, then you start seeing that, well, yeah, because the scriptures actually say the non-devotees have no good qualities. Why? Because they're engaged in material activities, and the material energy is always changing. Yasyasti bhakti bhagavati akinchana Savai gunas tastasay sama harava bhakto kato mahaguna manoratena sato dayato vahi. It's a nice verse. It explains that what appears to be good qualities for the non-devotees is simply something that they use in order to further their material life. So they adopt good qualities in order to propagate material existence. And because good qualities in the material world are as ephemeral as their good qualities also are challenged by the continual change of the material energy. So when they're affected by the lower modes, then they start acting in that way also. So, but devotees are not affected by the change of the material energy and stay fixed in their good qualities, because the good qualities are situated on the spiritual level, not on the material changeable level. So, yeah, so you have to be careful not to enter into that association where your value system becomes challenged by these friendships. Be the friend, but don't become the victim of their friendship. It's not easy. Sometimes you have to avoid that completely. But you should know you're in a dangerous environment. You are. There was one boy, he was a brahmachari, very fixed in Krishna consciousness, and he was doing Sankirtan alone. This was in Croatia, and he was traveling and doing really well, distributing books, but he was by himself. And then one day he was on his computer, and he happened to hit the wrong button. And something came up on the screen which was against the four regulative principles. But somehow, because of no association, or for whatever reason, he became infatuated by what he saw. And then his mind got drawn into that. And then his mind got so disturbed that he couldn't practice his devotional service properly. He came to me, he asked me what to do. I said, well, you just now come back in the association of devotees and become serious again. The impressions of the mind can be so strong that if you see something or something happens, it can stay with you for a long time, especially if it's connected with something emotional. When impressions of the mind are connected with an emotional energy, it becomes so deep you can disconnect it sometimes. Prabhupada even says, yeah, when I'm on the airplane, sometimes they show these movies and I see something and I think, oh, now my mind has been polluted, because Prabhupada's not. He's using himself as the example how certain things you see or you associate with can also bring you down. So on Judd Bart, it's mentioned in the fourth canto, how he was a young man, gave up his family, everything, went to the forest. He was on the platform of Baba, just prior to coming to the platform of pure love of God. And he was there alone in the forest. He saw something that seemed to be quite innocent. There was a deer, and she was pregnant. And a lion roared, scared the deer really bad. She jumped across the stream. And when she jumped, she died, but she also, the baby in her womb came out when she was in that fearful condition. So now Jud Bharat, he sees the whole thing. He says, here's a little doe. No, there's no mother. So he starts taking care of the doe. And what happened, he centers his whole life around the needs of that little doe. And he becomes totally, actually affectionate towards the doe. Prabhupada says, and there's explanations on this, that he became so affectionate, it was almost like a love affair. Devotees are soft-hearted, but that soft-heartedness caused him to forget or to neglect his spiritual practice. And when he did that, he was centering all his attention on the deer. And then it mentions he dies in that condition. He was forced to take birth as a deer in his next life. But because he was such a great soul in the previous life, he was in the body of a deer, but he was aware of what happened in his previous life. So he started to associate with sages and not with other deer. And in that life, he finished his life as a deer, and then he took birth as Jud Bharat. The whole story of Jud Bharat is mentioned in the 5th canto, where he acted like an avaduta, one who follows no rules and regulations, just to avoid the association of other people. So he could keep his mind fixed on Krishna. So he had to go to 3 extra lives, or two extra lives, because of that little deviation in his sadhana. So what was wrong with Jud Bharat? Bharat, when he was in the forest, was because he didn't have any devotee association. If there was devotee association there, that would have prevented him from falling into the wrong consciousness. But he didn't. So this is very fundamental, that we keep devotee association, especially those devotees that are more advanced, or people who are at least equally executing devotional service, who inspire us in our Krishna consciousness. We give association to those who are in a lesser position in devotional service to bring them up. And we make friends with other devotees who are on equal level, and we serve and hear from those great souls who can bring us to a higher understanding of the practice of Krishna consciousness. So how to associate is just being in physical proximity. There's a way, according to the type of association that you take on, like that. So associations. And Prabhupada made a point that association is the foundation by which execution of devotional service becomes successful. Yes. We have the mic, yeah. No. Over here. Oh, we're going that way, huh? You got, we'll get you. I'll come back to you. Okay, nice and loud.
Hare Krishna Maharaj Narasimha. Maharaj, can you please explain the difference between Atyahara and Laulyam?
Well, Atyahar means overeating, over collecting. Laulyam means greed for mundane things. That's the definition. So we'll read something with Laulyam. Fickle-mindedness and greed causes the downfall of the aspirant and deters him from the pursuit of his goal. This waywardness is affected in 2 ways: by the unsteady position of the heart and that of intelligence. The affinity of the mind towards sense objects creates in the heart both attachment and hatred. These changes in the mind and heart disturb the tranquility of the aspirant, just as a strong wind tosses a boat in the sea. Even so, these disturbances of the mind distract the aspirant for his practice. So this is called weakness of heart. when the heart is not fixed, or the mind is not fixed on Krishna, then we look to fulfill that need in something material. And we get interested in material things, and we aspire for them and think that they will give us the satisfaction we need. And this is greed for mundane things. Whereas atyahara means that it's similar, and they're connected, but atyahara means over collecting, overeating, over endeavoring, like that. Practically the same, but one is more physical and the other one is more subtle. Okay? But by controlling the mind and senses, one can be in the association of sense objects and not be disturbed. When the mind and senses are focused on higher consciousness. Prabhupada gave the example using himself. There was one time Prabhupada came to New York, and reporters had come to interview Prabhupada, and some of the reporters were quite challenging. In the old days, it was like that. So there was one reporter who saw Prabhupada. Prabhupada was getting some worship by his devotees. They also brought a Vyasa-san to the airport. And Prabhupada graciously accepted it. Not that he wanted it, but that's what happened. And so one reporter actually was quite envious. And he says, why do you have to, sit on that opulent seat? In other words, he was
No.
challenging.
Otherwise open. You
Prabhupada's,
see, Prabhuji is talking.
giving all of this distinction and honor. So his whole thing was,
We have.
why are you being honored
gonna
so
listen.
much? And Prabhupada said to him, you ready for this? Put on your seatbelt.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada was sometimes very casual, gracious, courteous, and tolerant. And sometimes he got right to the point. It was like these bullets.
వాళ్ళు వస్తున్నారు ఆవిడ సిగరెట్ కాల్చింది టూ
So
మచ్ స్మెల్ వస్తుంది
he said to the reporter, the difference between you and me is I can be in a room full of naked women and not be disturbed. And then when his colleagues heard that, they all laughed at him. So Prabhupada was showing that, I'm not an ordinary person. I've come here on the request of the Supreme Lord to do the work of the Supreme Lord. So this honor they're giving me is actually not for me. It's actually for the Supreme Lord. So this is proper. This is proper. Not that I want it, but I'm in a position to accept it on behalf of the devotees who want to offer something to the representative of the Lord, which is ultimately given to the Lord as an offering. And Prabhupada wanted to make a point like that, so. And he wasn't an ordinary person. He came here as a representative of the Supreme Lord. So that was effective. And of course, the colleagues of the reporter all were laughing at their friend. And so Prabhupada was like that. Sometimes he would get really heavy with somebody. There's like one lady started challenging Prabhupada. She was wearing a mini skirt. And she was saying, she was asking firing questions. This was in Chicago. And she said, why do you shave your head? And Prabhupada said, it is better to have a cool head and warm legs instead of a hot head and cold legs. So, you can't mess with a pure devotee. You're not going to win, no matter what angle you approach it on. So Prabhupada, one time Prabhupada was talking about first class men. He was talking, we have to become first class. And he was glorifying the qualities of a first-class person. And this was at a university. This was in Stockholm, Sweden. And there were students there. So one student at the end of the talk said, "You think you're first class," said to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada just hung his head down. Tears start coming to his eye. He said, "I am not first class. I am fifth class, but I'm trying to serve those who are first class." So Prabhupada always answered something in a way that was appropriate for the person to hear. Sometimes very straight bullets, sometimes very humble, depended on the situations. But Prabhupada always had the right answer because he was empowered by Krishna to do whatever he was doing. So that was an example of his natural humility that came out in the front of these students. And when Prabhupada said that, the whole place became very silent. So, yeah, so this is a great soul. You can't predict how they're going to respond or how they're going to act. As soon as you try to predict what a great soul will do, they do something different. Just to show you, you can't predict. Have you ever had that experience? It happens all the time. There was one story where Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and he was going to his quarters, which is a small distance away from the temple. And when he would go into his quarters, he would leave his shoes by the door and go in. And so one devotee, he was watching Prabhupada going in and out, and always leave his shoes, put them on when he went towards the temple, leave him by the door when he went into his, so the devotee was thinking, "I'm going to get those shoes." So he went to a Loi Bazaar in Vrindavan, bought the exact same shoes, same size. He was thinking, when Prabhupada goes in, I'll just switch, I'll get Prabhupada's shoes. So he's ready. This is going on for a while. He's ready now. He's ready to make his move. And Prabhupada comes walking towards his door and walks right inside without leaving his shoes on. Without taking his shoes off. Walks right in. The devotee thinks, "Oh my God, he never does that." So the next day, Prabhupada's in class and he said, "Don't try to play tricks on your spiritual master." And then he gave him the shoes anyway. But, you know, the spiritual master knows everything. People sometimes would think, "I want to see what Prabhupada's doing." So he'd be behind the door. There was one time, there was a big keyhole in the door. The devotees are looking through the keyhole and they see an eye looking back on the other side. You think you're watching me, but I'm watching you. So someone asked Prabhupada, "Do you know everything?" Prabhupada said, "I'm not God." But I know what I need to know. In other words, I know what I need to do. I know in order to do my service as a spiritual master. That I know. It may not be perceptible, but it's always there. These are some examples of how a pure devotee acts that is unpredictable, can never predict. I was with Bhakti Tirtha Swami. He also had such great powers. He could also see your mind. So I was watching, I spent a lot of time with Bhakti Tirtha Swami. And then I was thinking one time when I was with him, boy, he spends a lot of time with the ladies and children. And then he looked at me. I didn't say anything. He looked at me and he said, "They need it." And I And there's other people who also understood that he had mystic power, and devotees could say he could also read your mind. You have to be careful what you're thinking about. So sometimes it becomes very perceptible. The face is the index of the mind. Okay, so yeah, I kind of went away from your question, but I think I hit the point also. Okay, we have one more question here. Hmm.
But I want to, I'm having confusion about this principle of Niyamada and Niyamada with two contexts actually.
Hmm.
That Prabhupada, many of his letters to the Panaka community, he mentioned that the details can be adjusted as per the time, place and circumstances of East and West are different in culture.
Mhm.
So this is my two observations.
Right.
So, we came from India and I was little confused by these two observations. Like,
Yeah,
if
that's a
details-
nice point, yeah.
some newcomers, they were taking selfies in front of Lord. And I was not qualified to tell them don't do that, but that temple allowed, it is not temple. But in other temples, somebody can know, we don't do that because you are taking Lord of the day. And the second scenario where there are 40% Western resident and also communication member and 60% Indian Eastern crowd. So, Mataji told you they sit together sometimes the newcomers and
We give leadway to the newcomers because they don't know. We want them to get connected somehow, so, but as they keep coming, then we gradually explain things. If we somehow give them the rules and regulations right at the beginning, it discourages them. Can discourage them, depending on the person. Can become discouraged. So the idea is to bring them in a very positive way. And then gradually as they come in, they learn what is right and what is wrong. So adjustment may also be for newcomers like that. Adjustment means simply using our intelligence in order to facilitate a person coming to Krishna consciousness. So sometimes it's like that. Prabhupada apparently also did things to break what we normally consider to be things we don't break. But there was time, place, and circumstance. Some things are a detail and some things are a principle. And you have to know the difference between what is a detail. Details are adjustable things. Principles are fixed. You can't change principles. Details follow principles. For instance, when Prabhupada came to the West, it was in India, the worship is the men and women are worshiping separately. Women usually don't live in the temples. They live in their homes or with their families and they come and worship in the temples. Temples they have women's ashrams, but it's never men and women ashram in the same temple. But Prabhupada allowed that. He said, because he went along with the culture. He said, it's impossible to change that here without causing, difficulties in executing Krishna consciousness. So he allowed that. So that was an adjustment of a detail. That was a detail. That was not a principle. So what may work in India may not work in the West and vice versa. Mhm. But then again, who does that? It's the persons who are usually the acharyas or the spiritual masters. They make the adjustments. So we can't whimsically do that and think we can, have some success in that. And then Prabhupada was asked, how do you know the difference between a detail and a principle? And Prabhupada answered it very simply, that it takes intelligence. It's not always so obvious. Anything else? There's another question somewhere. Right. Chandramauli? Hare Krishna.
Should we discuss?
Shri Shri Radha Gopi Jana Vallabha Ki.
So we were discussing about devotee and non-devotee association.
And I was just contemplating in environments like school, especially high school, there are often toxic people that can contaminate your consciousness. So I started to like limit my association with mostly devotees in school, as much as possible. I was wondering, how can we preach to someone without getting close to them and without being in a relationship with them? Like, how can we talk about Krishna consciousness or at least the basic principles without letting our mindset drift into their mindset drift into ours?
It depends, yeah. It depends on your previous relationship with them. If you have none and you want to somehow help them and you see the opportunity, then you have to enter into some kind of relationship. But it shouldn't be, it should be very, what we say, not superficial, but somewhat friendly, without getting on a personal level. So friendly relationships, but that has to turn into something spiritual in that relationship. Otherwise, if you stay in that friendly relationship, you'll find yourself talking about things that you really will drag you down, who will challenge your Krishna consciousness. So sometimes we say, hey, hello, how are you? How's things going? And you know, how's class? So some light conversation may also be a way to bring us closer so we can, they say, in like a needle, out like a plow. Go in very carefully, and then when you get in, and you give them what they really need to hear. Yeah, like that, slowly. We have a question way in the back there, yes. Okay. So we'll make this the last question, and then we'll begin the next part of the program. Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
My
Krishna.
question is, how do you, it's also on the topic of association. There's in a world where there's so much gray area between good association and bad association. Sometimes we see people that we've known for many, many years and they aren't always the best association, but they can be devotees. And then sometimes you meet someone and they're just, just showing interest in Krishna consciousness and they're the best associations. So how do you draw the line between devotee and non-devotee, or what kinds of association really is in this world?
Again, association means affection for. You develop an affection for the non-devotees and you can move into their value system, and that can be a little dangerous. If it's a devotee who is somewhat outside of the practice of devotional service, they know what's right, although they might be they might be living another life. So that kind of association is really compassionate. You're there to kind of bring them up, Yeah. And being friendly, a devotee by nature is friendly, but not friendly to the point that they sacrifice what they believe in as correct. Okay, so we can stop here. So Yugala, is he here? He was just here.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, we have to introduce the books.
Oh yeah, we have some books here. And so quickly just describe these books and
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna devotees different books and the Maharaj here and mainly writing a simple real time. It's a Krishna's way, not the way it is.
We